Hey guys, this is going to be very unrehearsed, but I thought I should get it to you soon before the day gets too late. I want you to be able to prepare for, I guess, what is Thursday, not tomorrow. Tomorrow we do the MCQ. So I hope you viewed your results. If you haven't, it might be a good idea to maybe look back and look at your results that are visible. There might be a duplicate name of the assignment, Unit 4 FRQ. But if you get the right one, then you can see your results. I have confirmed that. So this is a good passage. I think this is very doable, and we had we had a range of grades on there. And I think part of the problem, one of the biggest things that I'm seeing is I've got people who understand the passage mostly and are writing a lot, but you're not really writing an analytical response that really gets at the meaning and purpose of the passage. You're getting at the what and maybe a little bit of the how and definitely not the why, and you're only getting like 1 or 2 out of 5 on this rubric. Now that being said, if this were like normal grading in the English class, you know, and as evidenced by my curve, a 1 or 2 out of 5 is not 20 or 40%, right? We've got a high bar that we got to hit here. Okay, so if you've been there, that doesn't mean that you're writing nonsense. It just means that you need to pay a little bit more attention to the rubric and what we're trying to do here. Okay, so the prompt in this passage, Judd Mulvaney reflects on a time when he contemplated the brook near the driveway. Read the passage carefully, then in a well-written essay, analyze how Oates uses literary elements and techniques to develop a complex characterization of the speaker, Judd Mulvaney. Now, if you're let me read the rest of this first. Respond to the prompt with a thesis that presents a defensible interpretation. Select and use evidence to support your line of reasoning, which is however you kind of divide those paragraphs up. Explain how the evidence supports your line of reasoning. Okay, that's your support, right? Your analysis. And use appropriate grammar, punctuation, communicate your argument. You guys are all on the level where you're not going to get counted off for that last thing. Okay, I'm not going to read through this whole thing here, but I do have it up on the screen. So just kind of looking back, this is a passage where not a whole lot happens, right? This kid he's thinking to himself, he's looking out over a brook on a bridge, and his dad and his brother drive by, and he has some thoughts to himself, and that's really all that happens, right? But there's a really big interior monologue going on here. And if you are talking about what's going on in the passage, the big things are, first of all, that we got a true stream of consciousness here for sure, right? It's in first person, and it is kind of broken up in non-traditional grammar and things like that. So you could have gotten into that, or just in general, at least first person point of view. If you don't have that, then you really need to take a serious look at your literary elements. The setting is dealt with a lot in this description, and within that, there's a lot of work with diction. There's definitely repetition because he's like repeating this kind of jarring thought that he's having in his head, right? And then that kind of mixes in with tone, like what do those words and phrases do? So any of those things would have been fair game. Let me just look back at the order I was going to talk about these things in. Okay. So looking down to the bottom, he has this pause here, right? It's kind of a shift, which you might have picked on. Them too, all of them, every heartbeat past and gone, echoing words from earlier in the passage, right? It stayed with me for a long time, maybe forever. Not that I would lose people that I love, but they would lose me, Judson Andrew Mulvaney, and they knew nothing of it. Did they? There's that stream of consciousness feel, right? And I, just a skinny kid that runs to the litter from High Point Farm, would have to pretend not to know what I knew. Okay, so definitely what you wanted to get at with the overall meaning and purpose was something about him having, I think the best word for it is epiphany, and several of you guys use that word, but some kind of discovery, realization, and it's definitely having something to do with mortality, or how nothing lasts forever, people don't last forever, nothing is permanent, things like that, and that affects the, I didn't mention imagery before. Imagery could be definitely be a thing. All those things are affected by and affect vice versa the thoughts going on inside his head. So what you need to do is put together a line of reasoning that discuss some of those literary examples and either chunk them by literary elements or chunk it or claim a few in your thesis and then chunk it by chunks of the story and just kind of go in order and bring in the literary elements on and off how you want. Either one of those is really fine at this stage. I think in a lot of cases, it's going to be more impressive if you do the piece kind of sequentially, and then you're not going to be repeating yourself content-wise as much as the things overlap. But you could chunk it by device too. Okay. All right. Let's look at a couple good examples here. So here are a couple good theses. I always feel like it sounds like I'm saying feces when I say it, so I have to enunciate theses, theses, not feces. In Joyce Carol Oates' We Were the Mulvaneys, Judd Mulvaney is characterized through coherent details and occasional repetition of phrases to convey that the speaker is having an epiphany that creates a complex character. Now, gotta say what that is, though, right? You can't stop there. Judd Mulvaney is remembering a memory from when he was younger, which brought him to a realization of life and death. It shows us the type of person Judd is. Now, if that person would have stopped and not included this here, that would have been an incomplete thesis, which I put on a lot of your theses. So a lot of you wrote very well about what was going on, how it was done. But if all you're saying, even using the word epiphany, and then saying complex character, you got to say what the complexity is. What does it involve? You know, and if you're going to say there's an epiphany or discovery, you need to say what it is. Okay, and there's only so much detail you're going to go into in the intro and the thesis, but you got to go ahead and say it. Okay, or else you're just saying that he uses these devices. Now this person also characterized those devices too: coherent details and occasional repetition. So that's even better. Not necessary, absolutely necessary to get that thesis point, but it strengthens it if you've got a weakness otherwise. Okay. So line of reasoning, and got the meaning in there too, right? I'm gonna make a poster in the room that says characterize the complexity, characterize the complexity. Here's another one. At some point in everyone's lives, you have a realization, a heart-quickening, blood-chilling thought. You are going to die someday. Everyone is. Whether it's your first pet dies or you're going to a relative you never even knew's funeral. A little bit awkward usage there, but that's okay. Only knowing the rosy cheeks and cold hands. Now, halfway through this, we're already saying this person is using an opening device, but it's not just meaningless opening device. It's creating universality of theme right from the beginning, right? So it's saying that the experience that Judd Mulvaney is having is universal. Anyone can relate to it. The reader can relate to it. All human beings can relate to it. We have it at some point in our lives. So they're already on their way to getting that sophistication point. Now, if that's the only way you can do it, but that's a good way and probably the easiest way, certainly with this one, because what's more universal than at some point in your life realizing that everything and everyone dies? It does happen. It literally happens to everybody. And here's some examples, right? First pet dies, or a funeral. These are things that everybody, or at least most people, go through, right? All right, so moving on to the main thesis. In an excerpt from Joyce Carol Oates' We Were the Mulvaneys, we experience this moment with our speaker, Judd Mulvaney. Throughout the passage, Oates utilizes a medley of blunt and flowing sentences, as well as dark and depressing diction. Okay, there is your line of reasoning, right, with at least two claims, which will then form those paragraphs. Either that or make its way through the passage, talking about both of those sprinkled through or simultaneously, either one, to simulate Judd's harrowing and panicked entrance, great descriptive words there, into a mature and permanent realization that life will come to an end. Now that is excellent, okay? That is an excellent thesis there. Let's just highlight that whole thing. So many descriptors, totally clear, specific line of reasoning, and totally gets at meaning. It characterizes the complexity, right? Because the realization of mortality is complex, no matter what, right? Coming to that realization is a universal, complex psychological phenomenon. All right, here's a good body paragraph. And I'm showing you this one because here, it's not the exact way that I was talking about, but a different way to get at that sophistication point. Okay, the author uses particular words that elicit feelings that are subtle yet sinister to make us feel as scared and worried as Judd does. Okay, so elicit feelings, particular words that elicit feelings is going back to what that person had in his or her thesis. Okay, so you can trust me on that. So we've got the echo words, right, that are connecting it. In a topic sentence, right? Topic sentences, that's really the same thing as a claim. Those are interchangeable, right? Like each paragraph forms a claim, but the beginning of that claim is the topic sentence, and it needs to echo part of your thesis. These describe their environment as sky the color of lead and the most drained, which appear to be a foreshadowing of what is to come. Light typically signifies happiness and delight, even naivete. However, the light is being bled away, just as the security and happiness is slowly seeping. Is that purposeful alliteration? Being bled, slowly seeping is very nice. Compelling prose there. As they realize the light will always leave. That's got to be on purpose. Life is not forever. It's getting meaning there, right? It's commenting on the devices, but it's sprinkling in that universal life experience, right? They're entering a new stage of maturity. new understanding of the world around them. The rotted rail, black perches, gritty film of snow contribute to the overall and depressing setting. Okay, now look at that. See, so we're not putting a whole half of a paragraph in there. We're taking isolated phrases and using those as small quotes, right, taken from slightly different places, and that is supporting what's being said. We can almost apply the settings mood with the mood of the speaker, dark and depressing. Judd is haunted by the fact that every heartbeat is past and gone. Much reason to be. At the end, okay, so we also see transitions there, right? It flows together. This person can probably get that sophistication point just on writing skill. And it's not just, you know, stuff we can't teach. In the videos, right, we talked about using transitions, right? Using some simple sentences, but also compound, complex, and compound, complex sentences. Judd will never go back to the kid they once were. They're stranded in the ill comforts of the real world. The path from a young kid to a more worldly adolescent has been written about for centuries. Okay, now we're hitting more of that universality, right? The path from young kid to a more worldly adolescent has been written about for centuries. To Kill a Mockingbird and Catcher in the Rye are embedded in our high school requirements for the same reasons. This excerpt is another piece that adds to that collection. It makes us recall the melancholy times of being brought into the real world so that we might just mourn the loss of a younger, more naive selves. Okay, so not that every time you write an essay, you have to bring in names of other works or novels or anything, but is that a legitimate way to help establish the universality of the life experience of an epiphany of mortality being used here? Absolutely, it's great. And it adds on to the universality already expressed that it's just, you know, an experience that we all have. Okay, so again, that was something around that universality is the best way to go about it most of the time. Okay, so you want to either identify and explore complexities or tensions, illuminate the student's interpretation by situating in a broader context. Again, that's the easiest, I think. Alternative interpretations. Perhaps the author means to say this, others might read it this way, a couple of you did that, or employing a style that is consistently vivid and persuasive, okay? And that, I think we've got a couple of those things going on here. So whoever that was, you did a really, really good job, at least in that paragraph, probably the whole thing. Okay, so now we need to apply that to poetry, right? So I'm still going to ask that you have a defensible thesis. Let me just come off screen share here. We still want a defensible thesis. And if you can establish that defensible thesis by also establishing some universality, a broader context through the way that you lead up to it with an opening hook. Some of you guys do that very naturally. You don't want to waste too much time on it. But if you do that there, then you can touch back on something you've already established within your body paragraphs, and you can maybe even add some concluding statements that also wrap that up, and then you're really getting that sophistication point. All the while, of course, you know, bringing up your claims and having a good amount of evidence, but not too much, and a lot of analysis to back that up. So let me just look at these notes. I think the teacher did a really good job here, especially applying this to poetry. So I think you're going to be mostly fine. But let's remember that a thesis is not summary. It's not whether we like it or not. Don't take time to, you don't have to compliment anything. I mean, by analyzing how something is naturally complex, it's going to sort of sound, you know, positive, but you don't have to say, you know, this is great, or if it's like Shakespeare or something, like talk about what a master he is. It's unnecessary. Okay, so we're being subjective, but we're being analytical. It's not just restating the prompt. You have to characterize the complexity, not just, you know, we already know it's complex. It wouldn't be there if it wasn't complex. The prompt tells us it's complex. How is it complex? Why is it complex? How is it universalized? Also, it's not just a generalized statement. Okay, what is it? It is a defensible interpretation. And by defensible, we mean it needs to be defended, right? It's not just stating the obvious, because that would be summarizing. It includes minimal evidence. Now, when she says minimal evidence, she means at the very least minimal evidence, although there is a such thing as too much, right? It at least hints at a line of reasoning. I'm going to say you should have that line of reasoning in there. Okay, get those devices or techniques. They can be pretty broad. You know, it can just be like developing character or something like that. And of course, how an author creates meaning, right? That all things come to an end. That he's having an epiphany of mortality or something like that with the Mulvaney piece. Okay, ask yourself: is it debatable? Okay, does it answer the question? Does it show complexity and demonstrate an understanding of complexity? Does it raise questions and allow for disagreement? And all those things. Okay, and then you start to look for shifts, and you start chunking, and then you get your stuff together and figure out how you're going to order that. Okay. Same thing with some of the same things with topic sentences, okay? So take great care that your topic sentences are signposts back to your thesis, right? They tell what part of the thesis that you're proving. It's totally okay to be redundant with word choice if you're talking about literary elements, okay? Now, other things, maybe not. You don't want to just keep saying vivid over and over again when you're describing imagery, but you can bring the word up imagery a whole bunch of times. That's fine, okay? Don't try to vary it too much and let the reader lose track of what it is that you're trying to prove, okay? And those should be, in the same order as your thesis, and they should be analytical, right? Not just complementary. They can be, and then as far as the order of them, you can also think about whether you want to chunk them by device or chunk them by chunks of what will this week be a poem, right? If it's a structured poem, it might kind of lend itself to doing it that way, and then sprinkling the devices that you mentioned wherever they happened. Okay, what else we talk about here? So in the commentary, you want to connect. You want to be able to connect the text evidence, the lines, the thesis, the transitions. I think all that was pretty obvious how she explained it. But one other thing I want to talk about is the ratio of evidence to commentary, right? So some of you guys are still, at the point where in each body paragraph you just get like one quote, and then you're just kind of summarizing, right, and repeating that it's complex. This shows that it's complex, but you're never saying how it's complex. We want more than one quote, okay? Per body paragraph, at the very least 2, but keep them brief and try to do more analysis. There should be more analysis in there space-wise than direct quote, even though you want at least 2. Okay, so got to start kind of beefing it up, use your whole time, try to write a lot, not to paraphrase, but to bring up multiple pieces of evidence and then have thorough analysis of them after, okay? Don't waste time writing out like 3 lines of dialogue. You can always use an ellipses, the dot, 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 get the important parts in there. And if you're referring where it is in the passage or in the poem, all you have to put is a line number or something. They're always going to give you line numbers, or you could say in the second stanza if you're kind of talking about that. But don't waste time like writing out a whole bunch of lines. There's no reason for that, okay? And then finally at the end, we had a little grammar lesson, right? The elements of composition. Now, we are actually just starting right now, I would say next week, a unit on the different structures of sentences, okay? So we may not be able to talk about that in as informed a way as we can soon, but it's not like you've never learned that, okay? A simple sentence just has, one independent clause. It has a subject and a predicate. A compound sentence has at least 2 sets of those, right? Connected by a semicolon or a comma and a conjunction. She talked about all this in the video, right? A complex sentence has 1 independent clause and at least 1 subordinate clause, starting with a subordinate conjunction, like when or although or that or something like that. And then a compound complex is the same thing, but it's got 2 independent clauses and then at least 1 subordinate clause. So another, I don't want to just say some short sentences and some long sentences, but that is part of it, right? And it shouldn't be all really long, complicated sentences with a million clauses, because then it just gets too tedious to read. Kind of switch it up back and forth. Use a semicolon here and there, short, little, impactful, simple sentence here and there, but then string some other things together with conjunctions and semicolons if you know how to use those properly and things like that. I would stay mostly away from purposeful fragments, although some of you guys have some skill at using those for effect. That's only going to be good if you're obviously using it for effect. Okay, so I would caution you on doing that very much. I'll just put it that way. Okay, I think that's it. Let me check my list here. Hope you guys are having a good snow day. If you have any other questions about how your essay was graded or about writing about poetry, then let me know. But I guess just as a final note, I know some of you guys have anxiety about these essays in general. And with the poem one, you think to yourself, like I said the other day, what if I don't get it? How am I going to write about it? Well, I'm not trying to give you one that's going to stump you. I think you're going to be able to at least tell what's going on. But with a prompt, you shouldn't be trying to interpret absolutely every part of the entire poem. Okay, you're going to have something that has to be pretty specific about it. It might be global, but as long as you deal with several specifics, the major ones that are there, you're going to be fine. So if there's a line here, a line there you're confused about, you can probably get around it, probably, and not have to discuss those. So you don't have to talk about every single thing. It's only 45 minutes, right? All right, I'm probably repeating myself at this point. So again, I hope you're enjoying your snow day. Watch this. Please get in touch with me if you're feeling unsure about this. And I will see you tomorrow for the MCQ. Maybe look over all your video notes in reference to that. I was thinking I might put up maybe an optional practice too, just to kind of give you a little bit more. We've looked at a lot of poems, but a little more on the spot type thing. So you can watch for that, but it won't be required. All right. See you tomorrow for a live session.